Welcome to this video tutorial for Virtual Racing School with the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car on iRacing. This week we visit the legendary circuit of Imola in Italy. The lap I'll be dissecting with the driving analyzer is driven by Rens Broekman with the race fuel in default weather with the time of day set to morning. I'll play the lap first in full before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was 1 minute 43.478. As ever then, from the list of data packs on the VRS website, we're going to choose the Porsche iRacing Cup as driven by Rens Broekman. Week 7 then is Imola. Loads up the session details where you can download the lap data, the replay, and of course the setup. I'm just going to click on Learn Track, which will load up the analyzer. It will start to play the lap through. I'll pause it, and for any of you who might be new to this, you have a steering angle trace at the top left, you have a speed trace, of course these are through the duration of the lap, brake and throttle input traces at the bottom, and live inputs at the bottom left. So sector 1 is going to start us from the run from the start finish line to the braking zone for turn 1. It's obviously straight line this as much as possible, hug the left there, bring the car gradually out over to the right hand side, and then spot your braking marker for turn 1, which is quite early in this car, which is the 200 marker. So we'll go to sector 2 and reduce it to half speed. So yeah, braking just before the 200 marker, braking quite hard. Let me just go back because I want to show you the line that you take. So there's a slight kink under braking, so you want to straight line that, so we'll come away from the edge of the circuit here, and then by the time Rens finishes braking, he's back over to the right hand edge of the circuit. I'll just go to chase view to show you that. So we're turning in right at the edge of the circuit and leading off those brakes as you turn in, but notice how Rens does not completely lift off the brake. Coasting is bad in this car, and you want to keep the front end loaded up because it's very light. So holding those brakes all the way into the apex, you can be quite liberal with your use of curbs in this car. So you've got these nasty sharp sausage curbs, or black and yellow curbs, which are quite nasty in some cars, but in the Porsche you can get away with them. And really you want to be on them and picking up the throttle as you apex. And then, so this is Tamburello, of course. This is very much about setting yourself up for the exit. So your line in the entry is going to set yourself up for the next right-hander. So you want to be nice and tight as you exit. And Rens is not quite reaching full throttle there before bringing the car over to the right-hand side again, hitting his second apex, and again using a lot of curb. The car can get slightly unsettled on this curb, so you see that Rens feathers out of the throttle slightly there. Just play that through, and then eventually commits to full throttle shortly before then feathering off again as he rides the curb on the inside for the left-hander. And again, I just want to show you the car positioning there. So he's on the curb there fully. So using all of the track on the exit, of course, there is a nice wide curb on the exit which you can take full advantage of. Just be careful not to stay wide out onto the grass by the time it finishes. Into the second high-speed chicane of Villeneuve, you have this 100 braking marker, which is going to be the beginning of the braking zone into here. Now notice this time Rens bleeds off relatively early on in the braking, so just play that through. So shortly after the 50 marker he turns in, pretty much at the 50 marker actually. He turns in, and as he's turned in he's bled off the brake pressure quite a lot, because you're trying to get the car to rotate. You don't want to lock up a wheel and ask for too much from the tyres. Holding those brakes all the way into the first apex on the left, where you want to keep the car nice and tight on the exit, and again you can use a decent amount of curb. So Rens does a good job here of keeping the car tight, and then you have a very brief braking zone into the right-hander. Brief because you are in a straight line for a very short period of time, so you want to take advantage of that. So brake hard briefly, but then as soon as you start turning in, you want to be bleeding back off that pedal until the apex. And again, using lots of curb and picking up the throttle on the apex for a nice drive out of the corner. Now you are quite heavily traction limited under such loads, so Rens hesitates for quite a while before he reaches full throttle. So he picks it up fast initially, but then modulates to full throttle on the exit. And again, you've got a really open curb on the exit which you can take full advantage of. So we've got all four wheels over the curb there, as long as you avoid the gravel. Into the hairpin now of Tosa. You've got this access road on the right hand side. We'll go to sector 4 for that. That's going to be your braking zone pretty much into here. Now you can actually apex reasonably early here, but you do want a good exit, so it's better for your exit if you have a later apex like Rens has just having right now. So again, as soon as he starts turning in, he's bleeding off those brakes, but holding those brakes all the way into the apex. And at the apex, which again, like I said, a very late apex for him this time, he picks up the throttle quite firmly, and then as he's waiting for the car to straighten up, he modulates on the edge of traction and then straightens up and plants the throttle. Again, you've got a bit of exit curb to take advantage of on the exit, but I wouldn't use too much here because you're really trying to put the power down, and the AstroTurf there doesn't have much traction there available. So the run now towards Piratella. Keep the car over to the right hand side, up over the crest. Go to sector 5 for this. Braking in between the 100 and the 50 markers. Keep the car in a straight line. Just slow that down and turn in shortly after the 50 marker. And again, as you turn in, bleed off those brakes, but hold them all the way into the apex. Quite a late apex again, because the exit's quite tight. So quite a short apex here, and you want to try and keep the car inside of this extra curb. The curb on the exit does have AstroTurf, but you want to try and avoid that because it will because it is quite slippery. So in third gear, Rens is able to get to full throttle quite quickly here on the exit down the hill. Keep the car nice and tight over to the left. To sector 6 now. Braking in between the 100 and the 50 markers. Into Acqua Minerale. This is a very tricky corner because it kind of leads into the braking zone for turn 10. So down the hill you can brake hard initially, but you're pretty much turning in almost straight away, so you need to bleed off those brakes. And you need to spot your apex here, which is this curb. Use a little bit of that, but not too much. Just show you that there. And then, so notice how Rens never comes off the brakes entirely because he wants to keep the front end loaded up. Helps the car rotate. And then there is a short period where the corner kind of opens up into turn 10, and that's when you can get on the brakes a little bit harder, quite briefly. Allow the car to run out towards the entry curb on the left there. And then as the curb begins to end, you can bleed off those brakes and turn in into the apex. Now this time Rens is avoiding those curbs, which are likely to upset the car more here. And this is a very important traction zone up the hill, and you can see even there the car is quite bouncy off that curb. So exercise some patience with reaching full throttle. Straighten the car up the hill. Allow the car out onto the exit curb, but not too much. Just keep everything nice and quiet. Up towards the tricky chicane of Variante Alta. Braking here is going to be at the 100 marker. Braking quite hard initially. And then shortly before this gantry above us, you want to bleed off those brakes and turn in. Now, turning in quite early for this chicane. These curbs are quite big, but you can really use a lot of curbs in this car. So look at that, completely over that first curb. Over the second curb, a little bit less as the car lands. The second curb is more about getting the power down, so you can be very greedy over the first one, but you need to be a little bit more cautious with the second one so that you can get hard on the throttle without oversteering. So Rens is able to reach full throttle even before the exit curb this time. Gets the car nice and straight, and there is a small correction for oversteer, so that's the risk of getting on the power so early. But yeah, good car control is nice to be able to collect those moments. Keep the car nice and tight to the left down the hill. Keep left, which will then set yourself up nicely for the right-hander. We'll go to sector 8 for this. Now you notice that this obviously leads into the braking zone into Rivazza, that Rens doesn't brake super hard straight away. So he lifts just below this bridge and then kind of almost coasts a little bit until the car is straight, and only where the car is straight does he then get back on the brakes more firmly. So now braking quite hard, sustaining those brakes down into third gear, and then bleeding off shortly before the curb on the right ends. Just show you the placement there. Could probably have used a little bit more entry curb there, in fact. The important thing is when you get back on the power, you need to run the car out wide to set the car up best for the entry into what is the last corner, turn 15. Now this corner is all about the exit, so we're fully over to the right hand side just before this tarmac change just there, and that's going to be the braking point. Now there isn't really much of a braking point to speak of. Rens is only braking about 22%, and that's really just to rotate the car because the exit speed out of the turn 14 is not that high. So off the curb and then back on the power before we've apexed. So that's the goal, to be on the throttle as soon as possible, but not straight to full throttle. So traction limited, so slight modulation and patience required before you can really commit to full throttle. Reaching full throttle now that we're off that apex curb and opening the car up for the exit. Slight wiggle in the steering trace visible as Rens tries to get the power down. And then it's just a matter of taking the shortest distance from here to the start-finish straight to complete the lap. You can find qualifying and race setups, telemetry and replays over at virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with myself and top drivers from the likes of Coanda Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.